what it is.
I'm Hannah.
And I'm Tristan. And we're bringing you The Spectrum. This is the story of a perilous murder carefully planned by a mastermind strategist and then executed poorly. Also planned poorly, I lied. The story of a sick and twisted mind attached to a lazy Mountain Dew water balloon body. This is the shameful story of Joel Guy Jr. Psst. Psst. Are you that person that was looking for that thing? I got what you need, okay? I think you got something for me. Well, then it looks like we can do business together.
5 parents are killed by their own children every week in the U.S. And there are plenty of reasons why the kids do it. Sexual abuse, neglect, sexual abuse. But rarely ever does it happen to the parents that go above and beyond for their children. But sometimes it does. Unfortunately, this was the case for Lisa and Joel Guy Sr.
Joel Guy Jr. went to college for 9 years studying at the Louisiana School for Math, Science, and the Arts, where he allegedly was studying to become a plastic surgeon, but didn't graduate, all paid for by his parents. They paid for everything in his life.
It's gotta come to a stop at some point, right?
Joel Guy Sr. and Lisa each worked at different engineering firms.
Mr. Senior, one day, left his job. It's at this point he realizes that he needs to cut Joel off. Leaving his job was the last thing that he was worried about. He's been wanting to retire for some time now anyways. Joel and Lisa planned on retiring and moving 90 miles away to Sirgoinsville to Joel's mother's house in the mountains.
Some time went by and they were getting some things in order for the move, like putting their home up for sale. It was around Thanksgiving and they decided that they were going to invite their children over for the holiday. Everyone showed up and did family things, but not the family things that we were talking about in our last video. Ew. But, you know, they all hung out, and then the 3 daughters left and returned to their lives, but Joel had planned to stay until Friday.
The next thing we heard from Joel Sr. and Lisa was, well, nothing, unfortunately. Lisa was scheduled to work one morning and also made plans with her co-workers to get lunch to celebrate her retirement, but she didn't show up. One of her co-workers tried giving her a call like 20 times, but there was no answer. Apparently this wasn't like Lisa at all to do something like this, so the police were contacted. They were asked to perform a welfare check, and they most certainly did. The police soon arrived at the Guy residence.
When the police got out of their cars, they noticed that there were a few vehicles in the yard, and it seemed like that there was someone home. They knocked on the door and rang the doorbell a few times, but no one answered. So they check out the back door, and they noticed that the doorknob was taken off. It was right about that time they knew that something was not right. A heat and chemical smell was emanating from the house, and there was also just a few groceries sitting in the hallway in front of the foyer.
The police were adamant to get inside. They walked back around and noticed that one of the vehicles had a garage clicker in it. They tried to get in and it was unlocked. So they clicked it and the garage opened.
I hear dogs are howling.
Knox County Sheriff's Office!
At this point, the heat and smell was very strong.
Alright, so that pot, the one that was on the stove, its contents were burning. I don't know if you watched our first video about Catherine Knight, but in these stories that we tell, there's never anything good burning on the stove.
Investigating the home, officers could barely hear themselves think because of the unfortunate pup upstairs yipping away, begging for help. In the heat, probably lucky to be alive. They would later determine that the pot was simmering and the poor pup was trapped for 2 days.
I got the gun down here. Yeah, I got several. Clear.
Knox County Sheriff's Office! Back everybody out. That's blood, right? Everybody
Looks like it.
Is that blood or boo-boo?
It looks like blood.
Anybody got gloves on?
Yeah, I'm not supposed to.
Knox County Sheriff's Office! We're here to check your welfare! And then just drop back. Knox County Sheriff's Office!
Now those groceries you saw had perishables, and they'd been laying around for a few days.
Are you fucking talking to me? There was clearly blood all over the walls and on the stairway as officers made their way upstairs. And in one of the upstairs rooms on the floor, there was a pair of severed hands.
This room's clear. Hold up.
Oh my God.
You good, Jeremy?
Back out.
We got clear. Go. I'm going across. Got you.
Clear to get out.
Clear. Of course, that's where dog is. Knives. Blood. Is that people's hands? Yeah, I think so. That's what I think. That's what it looks like.
What's your fucking hand? Get out now.
I ain't cleared. We're not cleared this. There's blood all over it, though. You want to?
Can't back out. Everybody back out.
We need to start.
No.
A lot of. What do you got here?
Everything else will ready. You don't want to go. Everything else ready. I'll get on that. Don't call anybody else. I don't need shit blowing up here. I'll get on that. Back out. Out the garage, same way we came in. Don't touch nothing.
They were certain at that point that they were looking at a murder scene, and then they left the house for forensic officers to come and secure evidence. There were keys, wallets, a hammer, some pliers, and a purse on the table with some cash. Next to the kitchen table, there were bottles of bleach, bags of baking soda, and trash bags laying on the floor.
In the bathroom, inside of plastic tubs, were the dismembered bodies of Joel Guy Sr. and Lisa Guy, in a solution of chemicals that had eaten most of their skin, but not the skin on their backs. Investigators found hydrochloric acid, lye, drain opener, sewage line cleaner, and other chemicals that destroy evidence.
In an open suitcase upstairs, they found a step-by-step plan to kill Lisa Guy and Joel Guy Sr. in order to receive a life insurance policy estimated by whoever wrote it to be of around $500,000 and included 2 houses, This was written in the handwriting of, and in reference to, Joel Guy Jr., and would go on to be called the Book of Premeditation.
After Thanksgiving dinner, Lisa Guy went to the store to pick up some groceries, and Joel Jr. made his way upstairs and knifed his father to death in the workout room. There was a real scuffle, and Joel ended up getting his hands cut up while murdering his father. They knocked over a bit of workout equipment, and Joel Jr. pierced Joel Sr.'s lungs, kidney, liver, and broke several of his ribs.
Lisa would return home with the groceries, but before having a chance to put them up, would also be angrily attacked by her son. He severed 7 of her ribs. There were guns in the house, by the way, but he chose the knife instead.
He cut off his father's hands at the wrist, and then severed his arms and legs, and did something similar to Lisa too. But worse...
What's worse?
Now brace yourselves, because this is coming full circle. He decapitated her, and then put her head in a pot on the stove, where it simmered for 2 days. He placed their dismembered bodies in tubs with chemicals, and then turned the heat up to 90 to help speed up the decomposition process, in which he would explain later in his notes left at the crime scene. Being a lazy, useless sumbitch, it was probably at this point where he decided, damn, I've done a lot. Really put some elbow grease into it. Well, I'm gonna go fuck off, but I'll come back later.
He never came back.
So he left the shit to clean everything up there at the scene, and left it all bloody and half-assed.
You had one job! He was later seen on Walmart security cameras buying first aid items like hydrogen peroxide and isopropyl alcohol, and also while wearing a t-shirt that was too tight. He then drove back to Baton Rouge, Louisiana to have his wounds cleaned at the student clinic. Whenever police apprehended him on the 29th after being under investigation, they found a meat grinder in his trunk.
Joel Guy Jr. was charged with abuse of a corpse, 2 counts of first-degree murder, and felony murder. All this dude's bills, his car, his insurance, and most of his rent was paid for by his parents. His mother's friends would say that she worked tirelessly, only to give all of her paychecks to Joel Guy Jr. Lisa kept all of Joel's toys from his childhood, and when all the family was over for Thanksgiving dinner, Joel was giving the toys out to his nieces and nephews, which was unusual behavior coming from him. Honestly, the family was even shocked that he showed up.
His family would describe him as a little bit of a recluse. Whenever he does show up to these things, he usually keeps to himself or stays up in his old bedroom. Joel Jr.'s sisters would go on to say that they doubted that he even knew the names of all of his nieces and nephews, but that day on Thanksgiving, he was engaging with them. Also engaging with his parents, which, yet again, was unusual. We couldn't find a whole lot of information about why his face was swollen in this picture, but I like to think that he stuffed some brownies in there to eat later.
While incarcerated, he wrote a note explaining that he was having fantasies about gouging out his cellmate's eyes while he was asleep. And he would say that he didn't deserve to be blinded. He just simply wanted a room to himself so that he wouldn't hurt anyone.
I think he's full of it. I don't think that he was going to attack anyone unless he had a knife in his hands. Plus, you care about your cellmate's eyeballs, but not your mother's head steaming in a pot for 2 days? Get out of here. The trial was not kind to Junior. The evidence was overwhelming, and he had requested to get the death penalty if found guilty, which he was, but instead got life in prison, making him a fucking loser at pretty much everything. Thank you guys so much for watching.
We hope we got to teach you something that you didn't know, and if we didn't and you already made it this far through our video, are you okay?
I'm sure they're fine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you guys next time.